So, we're talking about cap space here, specifically with the Magic, and it really comes into play here, Stephen, as we move into the next big deal here that we're going to focus on. It's going to involve Jonathan Isaac, another player that they gave an extension to here just a few days ago. And Isaac's situation is very interesting because it wasn't a simple extension, it was a renegotiation and extension. So it's a little bit different. And the rules that surround this deal are really interesting, for people that might not be aware. So deals like this, we don't get them very often. I think I saw a tweet from Bobby Marks the other day. He reported that this is only the 12th instance since 2006 where a player had their contract renegotiated and extended. So don't see this very often at all. We can go multiple seasons without seeing this happen at all in any instance. And I think that's because a team has to have cap space in the first place to make this happen, the renegotiation happen. As far as I'm aware, you have to have the cap space to be able to renegotiate the upcoming season salary, in which they did with Isaac's deal. So originally it was $17.4 million for 24-25, and they upped that to $25 million fully guaranteed for next season. I think that difference, which is about $7.6 million, comes from cap space. So they use that. They up that first season salary. And then what's really interesting here is that it's a descending contract for the next season. And you have a maximum of a 40% drop from the last season of the current contract to the first season of the extension. So when it comes to the extension, the next season's salary is only $15 million, down from $25 million. And if you do the math, that's a 40% drop from $25 million. So that's what the Magic did. They dropped it by 40%. It's fully guaranteed for the next season. And then from there, 26-27 is only $8 million guaranteed. And then the last 2 years of the deal, so 27-28 and then 28-29, are fully non-guaranteed contracts. And this is very important to keep in mind because Jonathan Isaac missed 2 full seasons with an injury. So he has injury issues in the past. He's shown himself to be a little bit fragile, and the Magic understand that, and they brought him along slowly. They don't play him a ton of minutes. He only played 15.8 minutes per game last season. So he's not a guy that's going to be out there a ton. They want to preserve him. They want to keep him safe because they know he had a really rough injury that took a long time to recover. So they're giving him as much as they can in the first year. And then just in case something does happen and he wears down, then they have some security in the back end as a safety net. So it's a really interesting structure. And I think it's really smart on the Magic's part because, you're bringing a player back that's one of the best defenders in the NBA. But at the same time, you're protecting yourself, giving yourself insurance in case he does have more injury issues and for some reason he can't play down the line. So I just thought this was a very interesting deal. And I think it's a great move by the Magic to bring back, by some accounts, by some numbers, the best defensive player in the NBA. What are your thoughts on the deal, Steven? What did you kind of gain from this when you first saw it reported?
I know we just talked about how the Magic will get expensive pretty quickly with Suggs extension coming up. With Paolo, you're going to have to pay. Obviously, just paid Wagner, or Franz Wagner, Mo Wagner, Gary Harris, they re-signed. So they basically not only maximize their cap space, but I love how they structured this deal. I believe Jonathan Isaac's last deal as well was a similar structure in terms of, multiple years were non-guaranteed. He ended up getting the entire duration of that contract because I believe this was the last non-guaranteed year, which they obviously since restructured and made it into that balloon payment that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. But I think just in terms of how they know they're going to expense it down the line, let's descend the contract. Let's make the final 2 years non-guaranteed. It gives them a lot of flexibility to, avoid the penalties of the tax or the first apron or the second apron if it gets to that point years down the line. We've seen in this free agency, especially with the new CBA actually being full scale kicking in, how, the Clippers are shedding salary. The Warriors, these teams who were paying record numbers for the luxury tax are now avoiding the second apron completely like it's the plague.
Yep.
So I know Orlando, I don't know if I consider them a smaller market team, but they're definitely not a bigger market team either. I understand their ramifications. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I totally understand the ramifications of trying to avoid the tax entirely. And they're going to get expensive quick, like we said. So I love how they structured this deal in terms of the descending, in terms of the non-guarantees. And I believe you just said it was, 12 times since 2006, Bobby Marks tweeted that a renegotiation extension has happened.
Yes.
This is only the fourth instance I can recall. I'm not disputing Bobby. I'm just saying the ones I could think of are Myers Turner last season with the Pacers did something similar.
Mm-hmm.
And Pacers, similar situation as Orlando. They knew they had to move up their sleeve. They ended up getting Siakam and re-signing him. And obviously they needed to shed some salary somewhere, but they wanted to keep Turner at the same time. I believe the Kings did it with DeMontis Sabonis last year as well,
Yes, I was thinking
if
of
I'm not
Sabonis.
mistaken.
I think
Okay.
so. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert Covington during the process with the Sixers is the first instance I remember, because back during the process, I was more of just a basketball fan than specifically like a front office, CBA, and salary cap guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't pay attention to how like these deals were structured. But I specifically remember Covington because I've grown up a Sixers fan, and obviously as a result, I remember that one. So yeah, I think given how Orlando is gonna, I don't want to say tax hell, because it looks like they're doing a good job of how they're building these contracts to avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
And with these descending contracts, look what happened with Denis Advija from Washington. He was a descending deal. They ended up getting 2 firsts for him. Kyle Kuzma, people talk about, as one of the best contracts on the league, specifically because his deal descends. So at the very least, if Jonathan Isaac gets a larger role and is actually able to play more, I think you said 60 minutes. And like, if they could play him
Mm-hmm.
almost starter minutes or a high level rotation player minutes, they could always flip him with that descending contract as well, especially how favorable it is with the non-guarantees in the final 2 years.
Absolutely. Yeah, flexibility is the name of the game for the Magic here. I think that's what they're aiming for, and all these teams are doing these deals, like you said earlier, with the aprons in mind, and they know that it's a storm that's brewing. Even if currently you have cap space, that if you have a team like the Magic that's up and coming, eventually you're going to have to pay all these guys. The Thunder are going to be in a similar situation shortly as well. So all these teams are thinking about this. It's in the back of their mind. So give yourself the best opportunity to pivot later on if you want to. And with Isaac, they can either, you mentioned, move on from the contract. They can get someone else back in return. They can just waive him completely with no cost later on, in years 4 and 5 of this deal. So, I mean, very easy to make other moves on top of that, for sure, for the Magic. So, and it's also good to lock all these players in right now, because when you deal with these extensions, the first year salary, especially with these rookie max extensions, it's the percentage of the salary cap in this salary cap year, for the player getting that new deal. So if the cap goes up each year, and it's been reported that it goes up by around 10% per season, give or take a percentage point, maybe it's a little bit less. Still, it's probably going to go up every year for the foreseeable future. So the deals are only going to get more valuable because they take up a lower percentage of the cap, even with their raises. So, right now, if Franz is at 25% of the rookie max, when it kicks in, the cap goes up. Maybe it's only 23% or 22%. So it's better to do the deals now while you're working with the cap today instead of a cap tomorrow, which is higher. So you're playing those players more later on. So I think that's another reason why you're seeing a lot of teams do it now rather than waiting, unless you're a team like the Sixers and you can take advantage of a small cap hold. And then after you sign all your free agents, you can, work around that. So I think that's really, really smart move by these teams. They know what's coming. They're working accordingly.
Absolutely. And another, while we're on the topic of the the renegotiated extension of the contracts, Larry Markkinen is eligible for the same thing with Utah Jazz. Jazz do have the cap space.
Mm-hmm.
I know Markkinen, his name's been surfacing in trade talks, but in this scenario, they decide to keep him and don't trade him. That is something that, some listeners could also be on the lookout for as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's another situation. And Bobby's talked about that as well. They're kind of in a waiting game with him.
Yeah.
They have all this cap space, but they're holding on to it because they know there's another player in their camp that's eligible for this type of deal that Jonathan Isaac got, that Sabonis got, that Miles Turner got. So I think they're trying to kind of figure out what they want to do with him as far as trading him or keeping him before they engage in some kind of deal like that. So that situation is going to be very interesting to watch. And just a couple more points on Isaac, just to kind of touch on what he means to the Magic and why he got such a deal. I mean, it makes so much sense to keep him around because he's another big reason why they've made a move up the Eastern Conference standings in recent years, because he's so elite defensively. 6'10", 6'11", almost 7 feet with a crazy wingspan. He's able to swallow up guards, forwards, centers. He's almost like a Swiss Army knife defensively. You can play him in almost any coverage. He's going to at least hold his own, if not excel in that kind of role defensively. You can go out there and you can look up defensive highlights of Jonathan Isaac. You're going to see him blocking players, gathering steals, disrupting plays, just contesting shots at the rim. I mean, anything you can think of that's a positive on defense, he's going to give it to you. So that's where most of his value comes from. He actually finished number 1 on dunks and threes, their estimated defensive plus minus on their site. They rank all the players. So they go from, highest impact, highest number in that rating all the way down. And he finished number 1 at plus, I think it was plus 4.1 on their site. So just to give an idea of how good he is. And then offensively, he's going to give you a little bit here and there. He's not going to be a flamethrower by any stretch. But, I mean, he did hit 37% of his threes last season on about 1.9 attempts per game, 2 attempts per game essentially. So he's got a little bit in that area. But defensively, he's such a monster. So with that part of his game being so valuable, and then he can kind of just slot in where necessary offensively to complement those other wing players and the other big men he's playing with. It makes so much sense to extend him, keep him around, and bank on him being healthy, because when he is, he's an incredible defensive player, just a great guy to have in your rotation.
The one thing I just want to add into that is that I was just looking for the tweet. I thought it was Shams who initially posted the terms of the deal, but either way, whoever tweeted it, whether it was Shams or Woj, Chris Haynes, Mark Stein, whoever it may be, they said Orlando Magic are negotiating a new deal with center Jonathan Isaac, which that's the first time I know that a lot of the times they just kind of say whatever. They're the mouthpieces, for lack of a better term, for whatever player or their agent. But it seems like I know Jonathan Isaac started at center for the Magic in the playoffs in the series against the Cavs. But this is the first time I've ever really heard somebody refer to him as, okay, look, he's a center. So, yes, he can guard guards, he can guard wings. I think he's more of a bigger wing than he is a center. But either way, I do think that was a little bit significant, that whether it was Isaac or his agent or the Magic, that they wanted him to be referred to as a big man, essentially.
Yeah, that's really interesting that they did that. And I'm actually looking on Clean the Glass right now to look at his positional breakdown. On here, at least for the regular season, I don't think he played any minutes at center. It has him at 86% at the 4 last season and 14% at the 3. So for Isaac, he could definitely play some small ball center, in a specialized situation, like if you're playing against a team like Cleveland that has 2 bigs and you want to just stay big to match that and put your best defenders out there, makes sense. But yeah, it just kind of speaks to his versatility, being able to play that center role in short spurts. I don't think they rely on him major minutes in that position, but he can do it. And at the 4, he's a menace. He's an absolute menace. He just wreaks so much havoc on the court defensively. So yeah, I can't wait to see what the future holds for Isaac and this team. I mean, for the foreseeable future, they're going to be a top 5 defense, keeping around all these guys. I mean, they have so much size and so much activity inside and out. So that's not going anywhere.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I need to add is that I'm not sure how the offense is going to, so as you said, top 5 defense. I don't think that's disputed, but I feel like I feel a lot more comfortable if we didn't see that Franz shooting regression we saw. I mean, Paolo, I think, is definitively a number 1 option on offense as he grows into even a larger role. I think Franz is a fine number 2 or number 3. But what are they going to do? I'm assuming they're going to have to start Jalen Suggs at point guard because they want to start KCP as well.
Yes.
And Suggs isn't that much of a playmaker or a scorer. KCP is one of the most high level role players you could get, if not
Hmm.
higher than that.
Right.
Um, and Wendell Carter, Mo Wagner, Goga Batadze, that center rotation, it's great. One of the best, deepest center rotations in the league. But I don't know where they're getting consistent offense from, and that would be my concern. But we'll see how how things play out.
For sure. If they get that boost back up from Franz on that end, I think they'll be in a much better position. So if they're banking on that, KCP's dead-eye shooting, still going to be clunky at times, I think, having majority of the same rotation, but maybe a slight uptick from last season offensively. So if they maintain defensively and maybe move up 2 or 3 spots offensively with a little bit more spacing, I think they're going to be right back in the thick of the playoff race in the Eastern Conference. 5, maybe even competing for top 4 seed again in that area. So they're in great shape. So they just have to kind of continue to work on that, get a little bit more creation. They have all these pieces they can trade, so maybe they send a few of these guys out eventually and get somebody in guard rotation that can make a little bit more happen offensively. So not worried
Yeah.
about that for them at all.